October 10th, 1962, 7:30 p.m., Moscow, Soviet Union. The lights of the Rodina cinema slowly dimmed. Ivan Petrovitch Sokolov gripped the armrests of his seat, his knuckles whitening against the worn red velvet. To his left, his 11-year-old granddaughter Katya leaned forward, eyes bright with anticipation. To his right, Mikhail, 9 years old, stuffed a final handful of sunflower seeds into his mouth. Behind them, Nina, Ivan's wife, gently placed a hand on her husband's shoulder. She felt the tense muscles beneath the fabric of his jacket. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The screen illuminated. A thundering orchestra accompanied the opening credits. The Heroes of Kursk, a Mosfilm Studios production. Golden letters gleamed against images of T-34 tanks rolling through wheat fields, their red flags snapping in the wind. Katya applauded softly. "Grandfather was a tanker too," she whispered to Mikhail, loud enough for 3 rows to hear, "just like the heroes in the film." Ivan didn't respond. His eyes fixed on the screen, but he wasn't really seeing the images. Not yet. The camera plunged into a tank's interior, showing 5 smiling men, their uniforms impeccable, their faces lit with an impossible golden light. The commander, played by an actor with perfect teeth and slicked hair, peered through his periscope at the horizon. "Comrades," he cried, his voice clear as crystal, "the fascist enemy approaches. We will defend the motherland to our last breath." The crew responded in unison, "For Stalin, for victory." The gunner, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20 on screen, broke into a patriotic song. The others joined him, their harmonious voices filling the tank as it bravely advanced toward the enemy. Ivan's breathing quickened. Something cold and viscous rose in his throat. On screen, the first German shells struck the Soviet tank. The tank shuddered, just enough for the camera to shake artistically. Clean white smoke seeped into the compartment. The men coughed lightly, nobly. No panic, no screaming. "We're hit," the commander declared, his voice still firm, "but we will continue to fight." The tank's cannon thundered. On screen, a German panzer exploded in a spectacular fireball, its debris flying in graceful arcs against an impossible blue sky. The Soviet crew cheered. Ivan smelled it. It wasn't the stale tobacco smoke of the cinema. It was something else. Burning flesh, melted rubber, oil heated white hot. He blinked, but the smell intensified. On screen, a second shell struck the Soviet tank, this time orange and red flames, beautiful, choreographed, licked the edges of the screen. "Abandon vehicle," the commander ordered, "in an orderly fashion, comrades." One by one, the crew members climbed out through the hatches, their uniforms barely blackened. They rolled on the ground, got up, dusted off their clothes. Not a single visible burn, not one cry of pain. The gunner was even smiling, making a casual salute toward the camera. The commander, standing proudly before his burning tank, clenched his fist. "The motherland will send us a new tank. We will fight all the way to Berlin." Something broke inside Ivan. He heard the screams, not from the film, real screams, howls that never stopped, that went on for seconds that lasted hours. The sound of a man burning alive, trapped in a 2-square-meter metal space, unable to move, to breathe, to do anything but scream. Dmitri. The word escaped his mouth before he could stop it. Around him, several spectators turned. Katya looked at him, confused. Grandfather? On screen, the film continued. More tanks, more clean explosions, more smiling heroes emerging from burning vehicles without a scratch. The music swelled, triumphant, heroic, lying. Ivan's hands were trembling now. He hid them between his knees, but the trembling intensified. His vision blurred. The screen before him transformed. The actors became real faces. Dmitry Volkov, 19 years old, singing patriotic songs an hour before dying. Alexei Khrushchev, 35 years old, laughing bitterly as the air escaped his lungs. Petya Kuznetsov, 17 years old, vomiting from terror before each mission. All dead. All burned, suffocated, crushed, eviscerated. None of them had ever emerged from a burning tank smiling. The film's music became deafening. The drums beat like his heart. The trumpet screamed like Dmitri had screamed. Ivan,
I know, Nina whispered. I know. But she didn't know. She couldn't know. No one could, except those who had been there. The cinema door opened. Katya and Mikhail emerged, their young faces marked by confusion and worry. They stopped a few meters away, unsure whether to approach. "Is grandfather sick?" asked Mikhail, his voice small. Nina turned to them. "Go back and watch the film. Grandfather just needs a few minutes." "But now." They left reluctantly, glancing back. The door closed behind them, muffling the sound of the film's triumphant music. In the empty lobby, Ivan Petrovitch Sokolov, 45 years old, former tank commander of the 3rd Guards Tank Brigade, survivor of 4 tank destructions, bearer of the Order of the Patriotic War and the Red Star, cried for the first time since 1945. Nina held him while he wept, saying nothing, because there was nothing to say. 17 years of silence were finally cracking, and all she could do was be there as the cracks widened. That night, in their communal apartment on the 5th floor of a building on Arbat Street, Ivan stayed awake. Beside him, Nina slept, her breathing regular and soft. Through the thin wall he heard the neighbors snoring. A car passed in the street below. He stared at the ceiling, marked by water stains that almost resembled maps. For 17 years he had refused to remember. He had built a life of silence, of performed normalcy, of never looking back. But tonight, something had changed. Tonight, for the first time since returning from Berlin, Ivan Petrovitch Sokolov decided to remember. And the memories, once invited, came in a flood. Preparing and telling this story took us a lot of time, so if you appreciate it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, let's return to the story. March 6, 1945, 5:30 a.m., Heiligenbeil sector, East Prussia. The sky was still black when Sergeant Ivan Petrovitch Sokolov climbed into his T-34's turret for the first time. The March air bit through his padded uniform, carrying the smell of melting snow and diesel. Around him, 17 other tanks of the 3rd Guards Tank Brigade were awakening, their engines coughing in the cold. At 28, he was older than half of his crew. He had been a school teacher in Smolensk before the war, teaching arithmetic and literature to children who still knew how to laugh. Now he taught boys barely out of adolescence how to kill and how to die. "Comrade Sergeant!" Ivan looked down. Dmitry Volkov, 19 years old, looked up at him from inside the tank, his young face split by a smile that hadn't yet learned fear. The hall gunner had joined the army 6 weeks ago. His training had lasted 3 weeks. He had seen a tank only 4 times before today. "Comrade Sergeant," Dmitri repeated, "is it true we'll be in Berlin in a month?" Ivan descended into the tank. The interior smelled of machine oil and cold metal. The 4 other crew members squeezed into the narrow space, the driver, the gunner, the loader, and now Dmitri at the forward machine gun position. "Maybe," Ivan said. What he didn't say, "if we live that long." Dmitri began to sing. His voice, clear and young, filled the confined space. "Across the rivers, across the hills, the Red Army marches with pride. For the homeland, for Stalin, we will fight to victory." The others joined him, their enthusiasm disarming and terrible. Ivan had heard the same songs in the propaganda films they were shown during training. Young men marching toward glory, smiling at the camera, their rifles gleaming, their faith unshakable. "Tankers of the 3rd Brigade!" The voice cut through the morning air. Lieutenant Yuri Fyodorov, 26 years old, political commissar recently arrived from Moscow, stood on a truck's hood.
2 months of training, Ivan laughed, a joyless sound. I've driven a tank exactly 8 times before today. I've never fired at a real enemy. So yes, Dmitri, I'm afraid. The young man swallowed. Me too. Good. Ivan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Fear keeps you alive. It's those who aren't afraid who die first. It was a lie, of course. Ivan would learn that soon. In mechanized warfare, fear saved no one. Neither skill, nor luck, nor prayer. You lived or died according to equations no one understood. Calculations of metal and fire that didn't care about courage or terror. The engines roared. 18 tanks moved forward, their tracks rumbling on the frozen ground. Ivan descended into his turret, closed the hatch above him. The space closed around them, 2 meters by 2, 5 men crammed among shells, ammunition, instruments. Dmitri began singing again. At 8:30 a.m., they received their orders. Reconnaissance enforced toward the village 8 kilometers away. German infantry reported, possibly anti-tank positions, possibly mines. At 9:15 a.m., they found the enemy. The Panzer IV emerged from a ruined barn like a predator from a cave. Ivan's driver screamed a warning. Ivan turned the turret, desperately searching for the target in his limited periscope. Everything was chaos, smoke, shouts, the thunder of the Panzer's cannon. The first German shell missed, the second didn't. The world exploded. The sound. Ivan would never forget the sound. Not an explosion, not a clean boom like in the movies. It was metal tearing. A scream that penetrated the bones, an impact that lifted the entire tank and threw it sideways. The light, orange, white, blinding. The side armor, where the metal was thinner, tore like paper. The shell penetrated the tank's interior. The loader died instantly, his body shredded by shrapnel. The second shell struck 3 seconds later. It ignited the ammunition. What happened next wasn't a battle. It was pure animal survival. Flames, not orange and artistic, but white and hungry, filled the compartment. Smoke, black and toxic, stole the air. Heat so intense it burned just by breathing. Ivan threw himself toward the turret hatch, his hands slapping against superheated metal. He opened it, hauled himself upward. Behind him, the driver and gunner fought to get out through their own hatches. But Dmitri was trapped. The hull gunner's position was at the front of the tank, low and narrow. The hatch was small, designed for a thin man contorting through. And Dmitri was stuck, his uniform caught on something, his legs trapped under twisted metal. He screamed. Ivan would never forget that scream. It wasn't an ordinary cry of pain. It was the sound of a human being burning alive, of flesh consuming, of nerves screaming every message of terror they could transmit before dying themselves. "Help me! Comrade Sergeant, help me!" Ivan turned back, half out of the turret. The driver and gunner were already rolling on the ground, their uniforms smoking. The flames climbed higher inside the tank. The ammunition was beginning to explode, small detonations that would soon become larger. "Dmitri!" Ivan screamed. I'm burning, please!" Ivan leaned back inside. The heat hit him like a solid wall. He couldn't see through the smoke, couldn't breathe, couldn't... The larger explosion shook the tank. Ivan was thrown backward, out of the hatch, falling 3 meters to the ground. He landed hard, breath knocked out. His uniform was smoking, small flames licking the sleeves. He rolled in the dirty snow, extinguishing the flames. Got up, looked at his tank. Flames were now pouring out of every opening, the turret, the hatches, the vision slits. A roar of fire consuming everything inside. And somewhere in that inferno, Ivan was still screaming. The screams lasted 14 seconds. Ivan counted every one. Then silence. The driver was vomiting in the snow. The gunner stared at the burning tank, his face empty of all expression. Ivan stood there, his burned hands hanging before him, the smell of burning flesh, his own flesh, Dmitri's flesh, filling his nostrils. This is what the films never showed. March 11th, 1945, 2:20 p.m. Field Medical Post Elbing Sector. Medic Sasha Orlov wrapped a bandage around Ivan's hands with the efficiency born of habit. His fingers, long and elegant, moved with precision that spoke of another life before the war transformed dancers into medics.
Before Ivan could respond, the tent flap opened. A man entered, tall and broad, smelling of tobacco and vodka. His eyes were those of a man twice as old as his face, marked by deep wrinkles and a fatigue that went to the bone. "Corporal Alexei Khrushchev," the man announced, his voice hoarse from smoke and age. "I told you my new commander." Ivan looked at him. "Sergeant Sokolov." "Yeah, I can read." Alexei tapped Ivan's insignia. 2 months of service, 1 destroyed tank, 1 dead crew. Impressive. If you have a problem, relax, kid. Alexei sat on the bed next to Ivan, making the springs creak. "I'm 35 years old. I survived Stalingrad. I've seen more destroyed tanks than you've seen sunrises. And I'm still here." He pulled out a flask, drank deeply. "Want to know how?" "How?" "By not giving a damn whether I live or die." Alexei held out the flask. "And by drinking enough vodka that my hands stop shaking in the morning." Ivan took the flask. The liquid burned his throat, spreading a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire that had killed Dmitri. He drank again. "That's a good start," said Alexei. "Now, lesson 1. Never do exactly what you're told. Orders are written by men who won't die if they're wrong." Over the next 5 days, as their new T-34 was prepared, Alexei taught Ivan the real rules of tank survival. Not the rules in the manuals, not the tactics they taught at tank school, but the hard truths that only survivors knew. "Always park your tank with the engine pointing toward the enemy," Alexei said one evening as they smoked near the tank park. "The rear engine is your only real armor. What if I need to retreat? Then you're already dead. Accept it." Alexei blew smoke into the cold air. "Rule 2. Always keep 2 shells in the turret, loaded and ready. 1 armor-piercing, 1 high-explosive. You never know what you're going to face." "The regulations say..." "The regulations were written by a colonel who drives a desk," Alexei spat. "I have a dead wife and 3 dead children from the siege of Leningrad. You know why I'm still alive? Because I spit on regulations every time they interfere with my survival." Ivan learned. He learned that vodka before a mission calmed trembling hands.
He learned that superstition mattered. Alexei carried a shell fragment in his pocket, touched before each battle. He learned that mourning the dead was a luxury only the living could afford, and they were all too busy trying to stay alive. Colonel Zhuravlev visited their position on the third day. Ivan recognized him from the briefing, older now in his memory, more tired, the smell of alcohol stronger. "Sergeant Sokolov, a word." They walked away from the other tankers. Zhuravlev lit a cigarette, his hand trembling slightly. "I'm told you lost your first crew." "Yes, Comrade Colonel." "It will happen to you again." Zhuravlev blew out smoke. "Moscow demands results from me, an advance of 10 kilometers per day. They don't ask how many tanks it costs, how many men." He fell silent. "I'm telling you this so you understand. It's not your fault, not mine. It's just how this war works." "Comrade Colonel, don't thank me. I'm not helping you. I'm just confessing to someone who might understand." Zhuravlev threw away his cigarette. "You have a good gunner now, Khrushchev. He's cynical and angry, but he'll shoot at anything you tell him to. Keep him alive if you can." Ivan couldn't. March 21, 1945, 11:45 a.m. Ambush near Braunsburg. Ivan's T-34, with 5 others, was advancing along a country road when the German column appeared. 2 trucks, a half-track, and a command vehicle. An easy target. "Target, 11 o'clock. Half-track. Fire at will." Alexei's cannon thundered. The armor-piercing shell hit the half-track dead on, transforming it into twisted scrap. The second shell took a truck. The German soldiers inside didn't have time to jump before the fuel ignited. "Good shot," Ivan said. "I've made better." But Alexei was smiling. You could hear it in his voice. That's when the Panzerfaust struck. The anti-tank projectile, fired from a ditch no one had seen, by a German soldier no one had spotted, hit the tank side just below the turret. The explosion lifted the T-34 onto its left tracks. For a terrible, suspended moment, the tank balanced. Then, it tipped over. The world spun. Up became down. The tank rolled onto its side. March 15, 1945, Ivan met his new driver, Pietra Kuznetsov. The boy claimed to be 19. His eyes betrayed perhaps 17. "My father beat me. The army seemed safer." Ivan didn't laugh at the irony. Pietra vomited before every mission. His hands trembled constantly. But he drove brilliantly, listening to the engine like music. During an air raid, a bomb struck the tank next to them. The men came out in pieces, a torso, an arm, things that had been human 5 seconds earlier. Pietra saw it all. The boy froze at the controls, whimpering. Ivan had to slap him back. That night, Pietra cried silently. "I want to go home. Anywhere but here." 3 days later, during another air raid, Pietra stopped functioning.
The German, Hans Müller, showed photos, 4 children, a Bavarian farm. Ivan showed Nina and his children. They shared tobacco, water, bread. Hans hummed a lullaby. Ivan understood. This man wasn't his enemy. Just a farmer who wanted to go home. Like Ivan. Like everyone. At dawn, reinforcements arrived. They shook hands and parted. Lieutenant Fedorov interrogated Ivan aggressively. "Why didn't you neutralize the enemy?" Ivan lied. "I didn't find him in the darkness." That evening, Ivan learned that Hans Müller had been killed by Soviet artillery. The 4 children would wait forever. "Every time you fire," Zhuravlev said, "you kill another Hans Müller." Ivan's hands began to tremble. Sasha noticed. "Your body is rebelling. Stop seeing the enemy as human or stop fighting." Ivan kept firing and trembling. April 3, 1945. 62 tanks were to take a position at all costs. 60% casualties if we're lucky, said Zhuravlev, drunk. 95 men are going to die to maintain pressure. Ivan didn't know his crew's names. Driver, gunner, loader. Easier that way. The assault was a slaughterhouse. Mines, anti-tank guns, one shell, one tank, again and again. A fragment went through the gunner's vision slit, through his eye, his brain. Instant death. Loader, take his position. The boy pushed aside the body, kept firing, because machines continued when men died. 31 tanks left. 12 returned. Fedorov declared a glorious victory. Ivan collapsed, shaking violently. Why always me? Sasha injected him with something. You're 24 hours from complete breakdown. Let me evacuate you. No, if I leave, they'll assign someone who doesn't know how to survive. That night, Ivan finally asked the driver's name, Boris Antonov, from Kharkov. They sat until dawn, two broken men sharing their humanity in a world trying to tear it from them. It wasn't much, but it was something. April 25, 1945, 8:15 a.m. Outskirts of Berlin. Ivan's T-34 rolled through the devastated streets of the Reich capital. Every intersection was a potential trap. Every broken window could hide a soldier with the Panzerfaust. Urban warfare transformed tanks into rolling coffins. Ivan barely slept anymore. When he closed his eyes, he saw Dmitri burning, Alexei suffocating, Petya staring into nothing, Hans Muller smiling, showing his children. Now he muttered in his sleep, startled at every loud noise. His crew watched him with worry, but dared say nothing. "Comrade Sergeant," Boris whispered, the driver, "you should rest. I'll rest when I'm dead or when this war is over. Whichever comes first." They progressed slowly through a destroyed residential district. Collapsed buildings lined the streets. Bodies, German and Soviet, rotted in the rubble. The smell of death and cordite saturated the air. "Stop the tank," Ivan suddenly ordered. Before them, a group of figures emerged from a cellar. Not regular soldiers. It was the Volkssturm, the German civilian militia, old men in mismatched uniforms, teenagers with terrified faces. One wore broken glasses and must have been at least 70. Another couldn't have been more than 15, holding a Panzerfaust with trembling hands. "Target identified," the gunner said. "Orders?" Ivan hesitated. These weren't soldiers. They were butchers, teachers, children forced to defend an already dead city, like Hans Muller, like himself. The 15-year-old boy raised his Panzerfaust. "Fire," Ivan said, voice hollow. The cannon thundered. The shell exploded in the middle of the group. Bodies, pieces of bodies, flew in all directions. The old man with broken glasses was cut in half. The boy simply disappeared in a red mist. Ivan leaned over and vomited in his turret. For the first time since Dmitri, his body rejected what he had become. The vomit mixed with dried blood on the tank floor. "Comrade Sergeant," Boris's voice was worried. "Keep rolling," Ivan wiped his mouth. "Just keep going." They advanced for 3 more hours, destroyed 2 machine gun nests, avoided a Panzerfaust fired from a window, rolled over debris and corpses, progressed towards a strategic bridge Moscow wanted intact. At 2:30 p.m., as they approached the bridge, the anti-tank projectile hit them. It came from nowhere, a shot from a basement they hadn't spotted. The explosion lifted the tank, made it pivot. Ivan felt the impact through his entire body, like being struck by a giant hammer. Then the second projectile hit. This time it penetrated, went through the side armor, exploded inside the crew compartment. Boris died instantly, shredded by shrapnel. The gunner and loader, whose names Ivan had finally learned the night before, Mikhail and Yuri, died in the same instant. No screams, no time for fear. Just existence then nothingness. Ivan, in his turret, was thrown against the armor. Something broke in his chest, ribs probably. The taste of blood filled his mouth. The tank began to burn. By pure reflex, Ivan hauled himself out of the hatch. His hands slipped on the bloody metal. He fell from the tank, landed hard, and
He began to walk. Didn't know where, had no destination, just one foot in front of the other through the burning streets of Berlin. Blood flowed from his ear, his vision blurred. His broken ribs sent flashes of pain with each breath. Soviet soldiers passed him. Some shouted something. Ivan didn't hear him. He just kept walking, a ghost in an apocalyptic landscape. He didn't know how long he walked. An hour? 2? Time had no meaning anymore. Nothing had meaning. Finally, hands grabbed him. A familiar voice pierced the fog. "Ivan, Ivan, it's me, Sasha!" Ivan looked at the medic, tried to speak. No sound came out. "You're in shock. Come, I'm taking you to the infirmary." Ivan shook his head, opened his mouth. This time, one word came out, a hoarse whisper. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why do I keep surviving?" The words came now, pouring out like blood from a wound. Dmitri, Alexei, Petya, Boris, Mikhail, Yuri, all dead, and I... His legs gave way. Sasha caught him, held him upright. "Come, you can't stay here." At the field infirmary, a bombed church, converted, Sasha examined Ivan. Broken ribs, concussion, minor burns. But the physical injuries were nothing compared to what Sasha saw in Ivan's eyes. "You're breaking," Sasha said softly. "Not your body, your mind." Ivan stared at him. "I'm already broken." "No, not yet, but you're almost there." Sasha sat beside the cot. "Ivan, listen to me. The war is almost over. Hitler is in his bunker. Berlin is falling. A few more days, maybe a week. You've survived 4 tank destructions. You can survive a few more days." "I don't want to survive anymore." The words came out in a whisper. "I just want it to stop." "I know, but it will stop. Soon." That night, Ivan didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the church's vaulted ceiling. Around him, other wounded men moaned in their sleep. Some called for their mothers. Others shouted warnings to comrades long dead. Colonel Zurlev visited the infirmary just before midnight. He sat heavily beside Ivan's bed, smelling stronger than ever of alcohol and exhaustion. "I heard about your crew. Sorry." Ivan didn't respond. Ivan woke up screaming. Nina held him, whispering that it was just a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was a memory. Slowly, over years, Ivan built a facade, learned to smile at appropriate moments, to nod when people spoke, to pretend to be normal. But Nina knew. She saw the hollow man she held at night, felt the absence where love had been. Sometimes, she confessed to the doctor in 1962, "I wonder if I would have preferred him to die in Berlin. At least I could have cried, mourned, moved on with my life. Instead, I live with his ghost, neither dead nor alive, just there." The doctor nodded with compassion. "Many veterans' wives feel this. You're not alone." "But I am alone. I've been alone for 17 years, even though I sleep next to him every night." She cried then, silently, for all the lost years, for the husband who would never truly return, for the life they should have had and never would. October 15th, 1962, 3 days after the cinema incident. The Sokolov apartment was unusually quiet. Nina had gone out shopping. Ivan sat in his usual chair, staring at the newspaper without reading it.
Mikhail and Katya, his grandchildren, not his children. Those children were now adults with their own families, were playing quietly in the back room, or so Ivan thought. In reality, they were rummaging. "Look," whispered Katya, 11 years old, pulling out a dusty box from the top of the closet. "It's heavy." Mikhail, 9 years old, helped her bring it down. They opened it on the floor. Inside, medals in worn velvet boxes.
The Order of the Patriotic War, the Red Star, faded ribbons, yellowed photos showing young men in uniforms before tanks. A letter, folded and refolded so many times the paper was tearing at the creases. Katya carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was almost illegible, scrawled hastily in what looked like soot or blood. "My dear Nina," Katya read aloud, "if you're reading this, I'm dead. I want you to know I tried to be brave. I tried to be the hero you'd be proud of. But the truth is, I'm afraid every day. I've seen things no man should see. Dmitri." "What are you doing?" The children jumped. Ivan stood in the doorway. His face, usually so carefully blank, was now filled with something. Fear? Anger? Pain? "Grandfather, we're sorry," Mikhail stammered. "We just wanted to get out." "But," "I said, get out." The children ran, terrified. Ivan entered, closed the door behind him, sat heavily on the bed, looking at the box's contents scattered on the floor. The letter. He had written it in March 1945, after Alexei's death, had planned to send it, never did, because he had survived, and surviving meant all those fears, those truths, had to stay buried. He heard the children crying in the living room, heard their panicked voices. "Grandfather is angry. We shouldn't have—" Something broke in Ivan. He picked up the box, left the room. The children fell silent, pressing against the couch like trapped animals. Ivan sat in his chair, placed the box on his lap, looked at them. "You want to know," he said finally. "You really want to know."
"Then I'll tell you." Ivan pulled out a photo. 5 young men before a T-34, smiling. This one is Dmitri Volkov, 19 years old, orphan. He sang constantly, patriotic songs like in the films. His voice was flat, mechanical. The children listened, petrified. Dmitri died in our first engagement. The tank caught fire. He was trapped. He burned alive. I heard his screams for 14 seconds. I counted every second. Katya brought a hand to her mouth. This one is Alexei Khrushchev, 35 years old. His wife and children died in Leningrad. Our tank rolled over. He was trapped underneath, slowly suffocating. I tried to get him out. I couldn't. He left as he died, said, "At least I'm not burning." "Grandfather," Mikhail's voice trembled. "You wanted to know," Ivan said harshly. "So listen. This one is Petya, 17 years old. His father beat him. He thought the army would be safer." Ivan laughed, a joyless sound. He saw a man explode into pieces. His mind broke. They sent him to a labor unit. He probably died clearing mines. Tears were flowing down Katya's cheeks now. Ivan continued, relentless. "Boris, Mikhail, Yuri, my last crew. I promised myself not to learn their names, but I did anyway. They all died in 1 second. An anti-tank projectile. They were there, then they weren't. Just blood and pieces." "Stop," Katya whispered. "Please, stop." But Ivan couldn't stop anymore. 17 years of silence poured out like poison from a wound. "Do you know what it's like to be in a burning tank? The smoke steals the air. The metal becomes so hot it burns through clothes, skin. Men scream and scream, and there's no way out. It's like being buried alive, but worse, because you're burning while you die." "Ivan!" Nina was in the doorway, back with the groceries. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling them the truth." Ivan looked at his terrified grandchildren. "They wanted to know why I left that film, so now they know. The films lie. They show brave heroes and clean deaths. The reality. Men burn, they suffocate, they break.
And the survivors? The survivors wonder forever why them and not the others. A long silence fell. Mikhail was crying openly now. Katya stared at her grandfather, as if seeing him for the first time. "But, grandfather," Mikhail said in a small voice, "you won the war, didn't you?" Ivan looked at him. "Won? I don't know what that means, Mikhail. We took Berlin, we planted our flag, but Dmitri is still dead. Alexei is still dead. Petya, Boris, all still dead. So who really won?" Nina approached, knelt before the children. "Go to your room, children. Grandfather needs to rest." "No," Ivan said, my head shaking. "Let them stay. They need to understand. This entire generation needs to understand." He turned to the children. "You're fed films and books that glorify war. You're told your grandfathers were heroes, but we weren't heroes. We were just men who survived what no man should live through." He pulled out another photo, a German soldier. "This one is Hans Müller, German enemy, farmer from Bavaria, 4 children. We met one night, stuck between our dead tanks. He showed me photos of his family. I showed him mine. We shared bread." Ivan looked at the photo. "The next day, he was killed by our artillery. His 4 children are still waiting for him to come home." "But he was the enemy," Katya said softly. "No, he was a man, like me, like everyone." Ivan looked up. "That's what war does. It forces men to kill other men while dehumanizing them so they can do it. And after, the survivors have to live knowing they killed Hans Müller's fathers, husbands, sons." Nina put a hand on Ivan's shoulder. "Ivan, that's enough." "No, it's not enough." But his voice broke. "It will never be enough. They need to know. Someone needs to know the truth." Katya bravely approached her grandfather. "Grandfather, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have gone through your things." Ivan looked at her, this innocent child who had only known peace, and felt something crack in his chest. "No," he said softly. "I'm sorry. Sorry for frightening you. Sorry for taking your innocence. But," he touched her cheek, "maybe it's better that you know. Better than believing the lies." That night, after the children had gone home to their parents, Nina and Ivan sat in silence. "You scared them, Ivan," she said finally. "I know. They'll never see you the same way again." "Good." Ivan looked at his hands. "Maybe they won't see me as a silent mystery anymore. Maybe they'll understand now why I can't be the grandfather they wanted." Nina took his hand, something she hadn't done in years. "Ivan, listen to me. What you did today, it was brutal. But it was also the first time in 17 years you've told someone the truth. And look what it did. I terrorized 2 children. You told them the truth. A difficult truth, a painful truth, but the truth." She squeezed his hand. "Maybe this is a beginning."
"Then I'll tell you." Ivan pulled out a photo. 5 young men before T-34, smiling. This one is Dmitry Volkov, 19 years old, orphan. He sang constantly, patriotic songs like in the films. His voice was flat, mechanical. The children listened, petrified. Dmitry died in our first engagement. The tank caught fire. He was trapped. He burned alive. I heard his screams for 14 seconds. I counted every second. Katya brought a hand to her mouth. This one is Alexei Khrushchev. Ivan pointed to another face. 35 years old. His wife and children died in Leningrad. Our tank rolled over. He was trapped underneath, slowly suffocating. I tried to get him out. I couldn't. He laughed as he died, said, At least I'm not burning. Grandfather, Mikhail's voice trembled. You wanted to know, Ivan said harshly, so listen. This one is Petya, 17 years old. His father beat him. He thought the army would be safer. Ivan laughed, a joyless sound. He saw a man explode into pieces. His mind broke. They sent him to a labor unit. He probably died clearing mines. Tears were flowing down Katya's cheeks now. Ivan continued, relentless. Boris, Mikhail, Yuri, my last crew. I promised myself not to learn their names, but I did anyway. They all died in 1 second, an anti-tank projectile. They were there, then they weren't, just blood and pieces. Stop, Katya whispered, please stop. But Ivan couldn't stop anymore. 17 years of silence poured out like poison from a wound. Do you know what it's like to be in a burning tank? The smoke steals the air. The metal becomes so hot it burns through clothes, skin. Men scream, and there's no way out. It's like being buried alive, but worse because you're burning while you die. Ivan, Nina was in the doorway, back with the groceries. What are you doing? I'm telling them the truth. Ivan looked at his terrified grandchildren. They wanted to know why I left that film. Now they know. The films lie. They show brave heroes and clean deaths. The reality? Men burn. They suffocate. They break. And the survivors? His voice broke. The survivors wonder forever why them and not the others. A long silence fell. Mikhail was crying openly now. Katya stared at her grandfather as if seeing him for the first time. But, grandfather, Mikhail said in a small voice, you won the war, didn't you? Ivan looked at him. Won? I don't know what that means, Mikhail. We took Berlin. We planted our flag. But Dmitri is
A beginning of what? Of healing. Not forgetting, you'll never forget, but living with it, carrying this burden without carrying it alone. Ivan looked at her, this woman who had waited 3 years, who had spent 17 years with his ghost, who had never given up, even when he had given up on himself. I don't know how, he whispered. Neither do I, said Nina, but maybe we can learn together. They sat hand in hand until dawn came, 2 survivors of different wars, finally finding a fragile moment of connection in the ruins of everything they had lost. November 1962, 3 weeks after the confession, Katya asked, Grandfather, can we go back to the cinema? Ivan hesitated. Why? To see the lies together. At the Rodina cinema they sat. Ivan, Nina, Mikhail, Katya. The film unrolled its impossible heroics. This time, Ivan whispered the truth. There they show a clean explosion. Dmitri burned for 14 seconds. Afterward, before a war memorial, Ivan found the engraved names. Dmitri Volkov, Alexei Khrushchev, hundreds of others. The films lie, he told the children. The monuments are silent, but now you know one truth. Remember the real cost. Walking toward their apartment, Ivan took Nina's hand. Not healing, just a step. In voiceover, elderly Ivan recorded, I tell you this so you understand the true cost. Every destroyed tank was 5 men. I'm not a hero. Remember that war destroys everyone, victors and vanquished alike. That's the truth Hollywood will never show. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and go discover them. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notification bells so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos.